How's it going, everyone? Dr. Benjamin Hardy here. I am here with Jason Korman from Gaping Void, the culture design company. They are also the people who make all of these amazing called semiotics. This is called a culture wall. This is something I've used for a long time. Jason and I are good friends, and we're just going to have free flowing, ongoing conversations about culture, culture science, human behavior. It's just going to be something we randomly do from time to time where we'll just have free flowing conversations, and I'm going to put it on my YouTube channel. And so if this is something you think is interesting, whether it's leadership, culture, human behavior design, stuff like that, that's kind of what we're going to cover. So what's going on, Jason?
Great. Good to see you, Ben. I was thinking it might be fun for us to just start with the basics about culture, what it is, how we define it. And, it's funny because there's lots of sort of definitions for culture, but, framing is important. So we're talking about it from the perspective of organizations. And people pretend that organizational culture is different than other social cultures, but they're really not that different, right? Which I think is one of the insights. Meaning, organizational cultures need to be designed for outcomes, right? Like whatever you're doing, whether it's profit or whether it's a nonprofit or whether it's a school. But the truth is that what culture does is basically program people's thinking, so you get certain behaviors. It sets up the guideposts around how people think and what's acceptable, what isn't, and how people connect, and also the what's interesting about it, I think, is this idea that it's designable, because a lot of people just think it's random, right? Like it is what it is, right? But no, it's designable. So if you think about, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about defining culture, but to me, in our thinking, what it is a collection of beliefs and mindsets and mental models and principles that drive people's behaviors. And I know that we have a difference of opinion. Yours probably more informed than mine about values and about values and core values, if you want. A lot of companies have core values, but to me, core values don't make culture. Culture is really a much broader and bigger concept than that. So what's your thoughts on what culture is?
I do love this, and I'm excited to kind of break down non-designed versus designed cultures because I think that that is a cool idea. I even think, obviously, within a family, every family has a culture versus a different family, right? But I think even family cultures, although designed, are not always intelligently designed. And obviously, we're part of a more broad American culture. I'm down here in Florida. You're actually in Florida. Orlando probably has culture, slightly different cultures than Miami in certain degrees, certainly lots of different cultures. But I do want us to go, I want us to break down and hear a lot of your thoughts on obviously the difference between a well-designed culture that's optimized for an outcome versus maybe a non-intelligently designed culture. I I'm not as hilariously. You probably certainly have better definitions of this than me. I kind of think of culture as certainly the thing. It's kind of the thing that determines your in group. It is your belief systems. It is your what you value. I don't know if I would go to the extent of like core values. Um, the definition of identity that I really love is that your identity is what you absolutely are most committed to and what you most believe in, and it's how you define yourself. And I think that in a lot of ways, culture is the same way. Culture is in large part the identity or the personality, but I like the identity of the environment. It's what the organization is most committed to. It's what they believe in more than anything else. It's how they define themselves, and your identity is the thing that drives your behavior. And obviously, as you and I look at culture, we believe that culture is the thing that shapes identity, and culture is the thing that shapes and drives behavior. And so, one other just thought on that is I think that most people either join cultures, they join in groups, they're born into in groups versus out groups. You can know you're a part of a culture because there is kind of an invisible line that says us versus them. Like this is us, this is what we do, this is, and we're all part of multiple cultures. I'm part of a religious culture, a family culture. I've got friend groups that are different types of cultures. I do think it's kind of the identity of what a group is most committed to and what they most believe in and what they most aspire towards. And it's how they define themselves as people or as a group. And that's the thing that drives their behavior.
So that's really interesting. I've actually never thought about this idea that we're all members of different cultures. Now that you've said it, you go, my thinking was, of course you are, right? Like it's obvious, but it's one of those things that's not obvious until somebody says it, right? And then it's always made to be simplistic when it's actually a deep thought. Like that's a really interesting thought, and I think actually I just got off the
It's why we have
phone.
different identities.
Yeah. No, I just got off a call with a big professional services firm, right? And one of the questions they asked, so it's a global company, they've got dozens, and dozens of offices. They're like, how do we make our culture work in all these different places? And my response was, well, you need foundational beliefs, right? Find that foundational identity, but then you let people do what they need to do in their specific, basically subculture, right? So you're never, no matter how hard you try, your Indianapolis culture is not going to be the same as your Paris culture. It just isn't. Different places, different people wanting different things. But if we can agree to what the foundations are, and even if using the religious model or religious sense, right? Like religions can scale the globe because there are fundamental beliefs that they have about identity. And then they let people, I'm Jewish, right? But you have European Jews and and Middle Eastern Jews, and they are different, right? They're not the same. So I think
there are certain beliefs that they share, even though there's cultural values based on their environments that are different. Like so Jewish people here in America versus Jewish people in Europe or down in South America, they're going to intertwine some of the values or the norms of their like actual geographical culture, but there are things that bring them together so that they can all say we are all Jews. And there are things, there are principles or beliefs that we hold that shape a huge aspect of our identity.
Yeah, and so there's different customs in different places, but a lot of that is yeah. I mean, I think about old religious models that were all developed in the northern hemisphere, right? But if you're celebrating Christmas in December 25th, and you live in Australia or South Africa, it's the middle of the summer. But all the iconography that we are familiar with Christmas is snow and pine trees and and the reindeer, right? But it's a different reality, and so the experience fundamentally must be different in those places. But we're going slightly off course. So culture, right? So defining culture from an organizational perspective is really about belief systems, right? And I'd love
Belief
to
systems and practices, right? Rules, norms, actions of a group, right?
rituals. Yeah, totally, right? From our perspective, it starts with thinking, right? And a lot of people view culture as starting with behavior, right? And there's a lot of very people who I respect enormously who are like, no, you train for behavior. You tell people essentially you train them to behave a certain way, and you get certain outcomes. And I look at that and I always think that doesn't make any sense to me, because what I want to do is I want people thinking a certain way, and then I want that behavior to actually evolve from thinking, not just because somebody was trained to do it a certain way. And I'm not talking about flying a plane. I'm not talking about training for technical skills. I'm talking about what we call social business behavior, because people think about business as different than the rest of the world, but it's not. When you're acting, when you're conducting business, it's really social behavior applied to business, which is we think about socialization of belief systems to drive to drive organizational outcomes. How do you view it? Right? So you think it should be straight behavior, or should it be about thinking?
No, it should be about beliefs and identity. That we're the kind of people that do this. So, like, as an example, the easiest way I can look at it is sports. So, as an example, the Jacksonville Jaguars, so the Jacksonville Jaguars are a team I follow simply because Trevor Lawrence is their quarterback now. He was the quarterback at Clemson, and they now have the coach, Urban Meyer, who, for better or worse, he's their coach. Urban Meyer is a major winner when it comes to college football. The jury's still out when it comes to pro football. He's a brand new pro football coach, but he knows how, at least in college, he knew how to create cultures of winning, where he would go into a program that was accustomed to losing and he would take a winning mindset, a winning belief system, and then he would design a culture where he would take the same people that were on the team the year before. So in this case, the Jacksonville Jaguars last year, they lost all of their games but one. I think they were 15 loses and one win. And so like it was by all intents and purposes, a really bad culture, a losing culture. That doesn't mean there's not talented individuals within the culture, but there was not good leadership and a good system of beliefs and values or identity that had them believe that a big part of that culture is that we win. Big part of what Urban's trying to do is, and obviously Trevor Lawrence is a leader in that culture as well, is getting the people that are part of the same organization, part of that same losing team last year, and change the way they think about themselves, change the goal that they have for themselves, change how they define themselves, and change what they believe is possible for them and what they believe they deserve and what they believe they want, and starting to get them to believe in that and then act within that culture as winners. So I think it's, that's kind of how I'm starting to see it.
So, well, what you're describing, and this is probably for a future discussion, so I'll just point to that, and then we'll stick a pin in it. But what you really landed on is one of the things that we talk about extensively with our clients, which is that cultures are programmable. People are programmable.
We can talk a little bit about this if you want, man. I mean, I think it's fundamental and foundational.
This idea has become super popular in society about agency, that people have the right, the absolute God-given right to control their destiny, to live a certain way, to act in the way they see fit, all these things where we have control over our lives, right? And that's all fine, right? And I'm pretty, well, I'm cool with most of that, not all of it, but it's all good. What people don't understand is that they actually they're surrounded by influences, which when taken together program their thinking and program their behavior, and they don't have near the agency they think they do, right? Because we are all impacted by the behaviors of people around us, and they are huge influences on how we actually conduct ourselves, and we don't even know it. We're surrounded by examples, which we can talk about, but so there's a guy named Robert Frank, I believe, wrote a book called Tim. It came out a couple of years ago, but basically it's about social behavior. And I remember reading the book. He says that we are all mostly impacted. Most of our behavior is actually conditioned by what people are doing around us, right? When you look at people's behavior through that lens, right, of that we are influenced without even being aware of it by the things we surround ourselves with, the people we surround ourselves with, etc. I think it really changes how we look at agency and how we look at our free will. So I don't know. I mean, you've written about this, really, right? Personality is impermanent is about this, really.
No. Willpower doesn't work most directly.
Willpower doesn't
Although
work,
I
sorry.
did talk about it in Personality is Impermanent, because there is a huge amount of research that shows that obviously your personality is shaped by your environment.
Sure.
Even the way you'll score on a personality test is dictated by the conditions in that environment. You're now getting me into Willpower Doesn't Work. So a big concept in Willpower Doesn't Work. I love the quote from Marshall Goldsmith. He said, if you do not create and control your environment creates and controls you. My beliefs about agency are that the more you become aware of external influence on you, the more you can start to shape that external influence. There's another quote that says your input shapes your outlook. If I know that I'm subtly being influenced by the people around me, which is very true, there's another quote that you're the byproduct of the 5 people you spend the most time with, which is actually shockingly true. Like, I have found by surrounding myself with more entrepreneurs than I did. Like, when about 5 years ago, I started surrounding myself with more entrepreneurs, a lot of whom identified as people with ADHD and more, non-focused. It actually led me to more ADHD tendencies than I had before, just simply by spending time with people with those tendencies. But I think that we can control our inputs in large manner. I can control the books that I put in my ears. I can control, but even still, I'm constrained by my options. I might not have the same book options as someone on the other side of the world, but my agency in large part, if I want to take ownership of it, is to control the environment that's shaping me, putting myself around certain people, even creating conditions with short deadlines, where like the environment or the situation creates in motivation, stuff like that.
The ADHD thing is interesting because there's a whole, and I'm sure you know more about this than I do, but there's a whole line of research around that that saying about the 5 people you spend most of your time with, it's not actually psychological. It's not social contagion. It's actually neurological. That those people literally change your brain. That your brain actually syncs and changes to match the brains of the people around you. So your ADHD might be contagious. It might be ADHD, literally contagious, right? Not socially contagious, but literally contagious. But anyway, okay. So environment. And we started talking about defining culture, right? So environment impacts culture. It's funny. I was in Italy this summer, right? And walked into, I think it's the Duomo in Milan, right? And I saw this. I saw a bunch of these stained glass walls. Like this wall must be, I don't even know, 40 feet wide and, and 80, 90 feet high, right? And I thought, oh my gosh, right? That these culture walls that we're building, like the one behind you, right, are really based upon principles found in the oldest sorts of application of religion, right? So you walk into these ancient cathedrals in a place like Italy or what have you, and you're surrounded with images, right? No, not so much language, some language, but mostly images that remind you, that tell biblical stories, remind you of who you are, that actually drive your identity, that actually connect you to your ancestors, to a different view of the world, that connect you to God, that make you, remind you, as Alain de Botton says, reminds you what there is to love, what there is to hate, and what there is to fear, right? There's another line of thinking that work is the new religion, right? You might be familiar with that. But in the execution of that, right, I think that placing ideas within your environment that remind you of what matters, and I don't want to use values but the ideas, the mental models, the principles,
Rather
right, the
than value,
beliefs,
you could say a shared meaning, right? Because the
shared
meaning
meaning.
is where the belief comes from. Like we both agree that this is meaningful. We so the
Well,
meaning and the belief connect to each other.
yeah, and then functionally, right? It's a tool on how we reinforce, because because thinking doesn't happen from a single thought. It happens from constant reminders, right? So if you look at religious models, right? You go to church so many times a week. You might be the kind of person that goes every day, and every day it's repetitive. You are doing saying very similar prayers or the same prayers, every day, time after time after time after time, and it becomes part of who you are, the fabric of who you are, right? And then very much, I hate to blur the line between religion and business, but I'm just saying that those methods are applicable for leading, managing, and getting
100%.
organizational outcome. And
Yeah.
so the principles, okay, you've got to create the environment. You have to first create the language. To create the language, you have to figure out a way to spread that language.
I would say you have to first create the belief system and the aspiration model, because religions have a built-in belief system and an aspiration model that, there's a reason why being a part of this in group and this belief system gives you so much meaning. And it also gives you a sense of identity and destiny. Identity and destiny go very hand in hand. My belief about who I am, but also where I came from, why I'm here, and where I'm going is a huge part of my identity. And you can get that in any context. Obviously, religion provides one, but businesses can do the same, where they can give you a belief system about who you are, who we are, and here's our aspiration. This is what we believe in, and this is where we're going.
The thoughtfulness, right? How you design for the outcomes you're seeking, right? Creating a winning team. Well, you have to answer your question. And we did something. We did a little facilitation last week for a client of ours, which is really asking the question: what needs to be true for this thing to actually happen? You want to have an environment. Everybody wants great, deep, meaningful collaboration at work, right? And so the thing we ask is, okay, you want collaboration, and usually collaboration comes down to tools and making sure people attend meetings, whatever. No, none of that actually gets you greater collaboration. The way you get collaboration first is psychological safety. Do I feel safe to express my true beliefs and feelings in this environment, right? How is it received? What are our team agreements about how we connect around new things? How do we what are the rules for that, right? And the truth is that deep collaboration is actually evolutionary. It is how humans got to the point they are now. It's not about, well, we just need to have conversation and figure something out. No, it is deeply tied to our beings. So then when you think about collaboration in that way, then you go, okay, well, what are the things that we got to get in place or get out of the way in order for us to be able to do this? And then a whole bunch of other doors need to be opened and explored in order to create that environment. Because it's not about Slack. It really isn't. It's not about a new tool. No, it's very fundamental to our existence. And I think that's what people forget, because in business, what people want are, checklists and things, solutions that they can say, oh yeah, I delivered that, I did that, right? But no, when it comes to the human piece, it's actually very hard, and it's complex. So I don't know. I mean, I know.
So would you say that when a lot of people talk about values, they're talking about, here are the things we value. We value courage, blah, 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 blah. But what you're saying is it's not necessarily values, it's beliefs and it's rules. It's
Yeah.
this is what we believe in this organization. We believe, like in every organization can have a different belief system, but it's like, I believe that, I can imagine and create my future self. Like these are a lot of my beliefs. I believe 100% is easier than 98%. And so like I
Yeah.
can come up with beliefs, and then I can also come up with rules about how I live out those beliefs, and those beliefs and those rules can then shape my identity and my behavior. Is that a lot of what you're saying? And
I'm less rule driven. It's more like agreements
okay, so
about.
it's beliefs and agreements.
Yeah, I think so. This is really interesting
I
because I
like
haven't
that.
quite thought about it this way. Because I'm a less rule is more rules. A rule, you get better outcomes with fewer rules, right? So
Yeah, yeah,
okay,
yeah.
I'll give
I
you a
agree
perfect
with that. I
example.
agree with that.
So you got a bunch of kids. I have one
Well,
son.
by the
He's
way,
20.
there's a really good quote, and this is obviously a religious quote. This is a Joseph Smith quote, but he was once asked, how do you get your people to do what they do? And he said, I teach correct principles and I let them govern themselves.
There you go. Exactly. And I was just going to
Like
tell you
he
a
said,
story.
he said, I don't tell them what to do. I just teach principles and they govern themselves.
So in parenting, I think one of the big mistakes parents make is they're always telling their kids what to do. Do this, don't do that. And I'm like, but for my kid, I was always like, no, I don't want to tell him what to do. I want to give him the tools he needs to think for himself so he comes to the right answer. So that when he's 17, I don't have to worry about where he is because I know he's thinking properly, right? Does that make sense? And so I
Yeah.
was always focused on like, okay, what's the thinking so we get to the right place as opposed to telling him what to do. And look, believe me, I'm not, I have one kid, right? So, and I'm not a parenting expert, but all I'm suggesting is that you can apply that to organizations as well, right? So, what are the mental models we need so that we will generally come up with the right answer? There's an Amazon principle which I love, I might botch it, but it's be right often or be right, most of the time. And what are they saying? What they're saying is it's not about an arrogant statement. It's about be thoughtful enough, right? Be considered enough in what you do that you're usually right. Like we can rely on your judgment, right? That's what it is. And I think it's a really interesting concept because, if you think about some of Danny Kahneman's work and some of the behavioral economics work, most of the time people are just the ones thinking, right? They're like going quick, not thinking, not really thinking at all. And what Amazon is suggesting to people is no, be considered, be go a level deeper. Make sure that you've thought through whatever it is you're telling people to do, you're doing yourself, properly. And I think that's the Joseph Smith thing, right? Like
It's a principle that they believe in that organization. That's the principle that they teach, and it allows their people to govern themselves the way that they fit within the culture that they're creating.
So some of those fundamental beliefs, right? And I would label that as a fundamental belief, right? Some of those fundamental beliefs, actually, if you get them instilled within your organization at scale, you're just going to make better decisions and you're going to be more competitive. You're going to have better outcomes. And it's not rocket science, but we skip over those things as if they don't matter, right? But they matter a lot. And I think there's real benefit to, well, Dan talks about this, Dan Sullivan. Thinking about your thinking is a really powerful idea, right? And I love when Dan riffs on that, by the way. I don't know, I haven't heard him do that lately, but it's because it's when you really sit back and think about it, it's a simple idea with complex, and significant impact, right? So
One other thing I think is just important to hit on is the us versus them component of culture. That like we're the type of people that do this. Like I think that that's a really important delineating factor of creating a culture, is saying here's what we do in this culture, here's what other people do. It's not necessarily an us versus them, like us versus the world mindset, although it could be, but it's more just like this, there's obviously some sense of belief that this is what's right, or this is what I want to believe, and this is what we agree on is a great way to go about things. Otherwise, I'll go somewhere else. And so I do think kind of being able to distinguish, this is what makes us different from
Yeah.
outside groups, and we don't do things the way other people do it. Not that difference is necessarily seen as bad. Like, I know, and like, we live in a really polarizing culture in America when it comes to politics. You don't have to, just because someone's different, think that they're bad, but you could say, this is what I believe in and this is what we do, and it is different from what other people do. And
Well,
I think that that's true of leadership, and that's also true of even parenting, saying, look, this is what we believe in, this is why we believe it. You can obviously go do whatever you want when you're 18, but this is different from what outside people believe in. This is a different
yeah.
belief. This is a
So
different set of values or principles, or meanings. And so you do kind of draw a line between us versus them.
So several years ago, a few years ago, you shared a book with me, the triple package, right? Remember? And basically, that's what the triple package describes, right?
Yep.
High performing ethnic groups, basically, right? And they all had things in common, right? And one of those
Their
things,
cultures all shared three distinct traits.
and remind me, it was like we're special, plus we're insecure about who we are, plus I can't remember what it was, right?
Yeah,
Do you
so
remember?
basically, yeah, so the book is by two Yale economists, and they studied different cultural groups in America that became really high rising in economics. Some of them were ethnic groups like Indians and, like, I think Cubans. And then there was certain religious groups as well, Jews and things like that. And so they were looking at what are distinct cultural factors that are similar between these groups that are leading to extreme economic success. And that's what the triple package is. That's their theory, at least. But the triple package in this case is that these groups all shared some form of sense of superiority, that being in our group makes us special. There's some reason why being a part of our group makes us more special. It's kind of like a superiority complex, where they're like, being in this group does make me more special to some degree than being out of this group, and I'm lucky to be in this group. All of these groups as well are somewhat stigmatized, in society for one reason or another, whether it be racism or, just being pushed down in society. And so they all have, to some degree, an inferiority complex that goes with that. It's like a chip on their shoulder, where they feel like they need to, like, really, like, develop a thick skin and prove themselves. And then the third one is that within these cultures, there's a huge teaching around impulse control. Obviously, within each of these cultures, there'd be different teachings of what to avoid or how to control your behavior, but all of them are pretty much like, they teach a lot of principles on, like, self-discipline and, like, avoiding certain behaviors and stuff like that. And so these attributes are pretty shared in certain
Right.
cultures.
Super interesting. In fact, I have a copy of the book here. I'm gonna go back and take a look at it. But yeah, so but okay. But what's the insight here? The insight is that when you're designing culture, when you're looking at how do you create culture, you can look at different religions, different societies, different ethnic groups, right? And there's takeaways, right? Like this idea of we're special, we're stigmatized, and there's impulse control, things that actually you can fashion that for your organization too. I mean, you could actually create that model and use it in your organization. But so the designability is a really fascinating part of what we do, which is like, which is really, how do you craft a community of people tasked with an outcome, whatever it is. It could be, winning a basketball game, but it could also be, delivering amazing healthcare and patient experience, right? But how do you craft the culture of that group to deliver those outcomes? And there's, I always joke with our team. I don't know if you ever watched SpongeBob with your kids, but there's a villain in there, which is which is Plankton, right? And he's often pictured sitting in front of this control panel. And you got all these ways of being evil in front of him, buttons to push and levers to pull. The control panel is really what we think about when we think about designing culture, because you have thousands of ways that you can influence and design for people, but you have to know, A, that you can do it, and B, that there are things that work. right? And there are methods you can use, and that what you're fashioning is a social environment where people deliver amazing work as an outcome. But it's systemic, and there's a lot of deep thinking around how you can make it continuous, and we talk about it as the infinite game, right? So anyway, so with that, Ben, great conversation. Do you want to do this again?
Yeah. Do you?
Yeah, I think it was great. I think it was great.
I think we can do more and more of this. I think it's just fun to teach concepts or to just dive into concepts. We can go any direction you want in the future. We could focus on just one specific narrow niche and just go as deep as we can. I do think
Great.
it's important to realize that in order to create an outcome, you need to create a culture, even a culture of yourself. Like I have an individual culture, which is made up of my habits and my beliefs and my routines, right? And so like a group culture is just doing something where two people or more, come together and they have a set of beliefs and meanings that they share together, and essentially goals that they share. That goal could be just that they get together and watch Friends every Thursday night, and they eat popcorn. Like that's, you know what I mean? Like, but they do that together and they have a sense of shared meaning and sense of shared purpose, and there's a shared identity where they come together and they have an objective and they have a sense of meanings that brings them together, and that's what creates the relationship, and that's what drives the behavior, the ongoing behavior. And so I think that ignoring culture is bad idea, because we're all shaped by culture, as you already described.
Right.
But then designing the kind of culture that you want to influence your identity and behavior in a group is really what leadership is about. We're the kind of people who do this. This is our shared mission. This is our shared vision. This is our shared purpose. This is what we believe more than anything else. And this is why we're coming together. If you can build that and teach principles based on whatever it is your value or belief system is and the objective you're trying to achieve, then you can create a group of people that are all harmoniously going in the right direction, even though they're autonomous within that. They're choosing to be within that culture, even though they're being shaped by the culture, and vice versa. They're actually simultaneously shaping it as well, because they'll bring elements of themselves into the culture as well. And it's a living, breathing system.
Yeah. Joyously participate, right? Knowing that they're actually participating in a thing which shapes them, but also they welcome, right? They want to be part of. And I think that tracks to a vision discussion and a mission discussion that we should have next time.